one of the examples is Ireland. Let me show you the corporate tax rate in Ireland. $12.5%, okay? Net operating losses can be carried back 1 year and carried forward indefinitely. And corporate tax rate in the US, 21% for now. If you actually end up getting a Democratic president, a Democratic Congress, it may actually go up after 2024. So you're an American firm and you have operations in Europe. It's probably not a bad idea to have them in Ireland. For example, let's look at the corporate tax rate in Germany. That's 15%. Let's look at France, 25%. Spain, 25. Let me see. Luxembourg, 15. So it varies. It looks like Ireland is the lowest. So if I'm an American multinational firm and I do business in Europe, it's not a bad idea for me to officially be headquartered in Ireland, so I can book all my profits in Ireland. So I pay only 12.5% corporate income tax. There is a double tax treaty between Ireland and America. So if you bring your money here, you're going to pay 21, but what you paid in Ireland, you can actually deduct that. Fine. But why would you bring it here? Let's say you're Apple. Would you bring it here? No. In fact, they book a lot of their profits in Europe. Let me give you an example. Actual taxes paid by Apple in 2022. And let's look at Apple net income in 2022. They made over $100 billion. It looks like they paid an average of 16, and that's not just federal. So federal is 16, the average state income tax in the US is typically about 5%. So these guys are not paying 26%, they're paying only 16. Why? Because they're booking a lot of their profits abroad. One thing about that, as long as that money stays abroad, it doesn't get taxed in the US. So if I'm a multinational bank or international bank, I'm definitely going to have and operate a subsidiary at a minimum in Ireland. Why? Because I want to keep Apple as a client, because they're going to do their banking over there. And it's a lot easier to compete with the local banks. You can have, if you want to be a little bit more involved, you can actually have a subsidiary bank. A branch is legally part of the parent. Okay? But subsidiary is you just buy a bank in that foreign country, you own it 100%, and they are not actually subject to US banking regulations. So if I go to Turkey and buy a small bank, you know, let me find my, let's see. Let's find total assets. Okay, here's a bank. It's kind of an investment bank, but it's called Turkish Bank. And it has $150 million in assets, or $150 billion in assets, I'm sorry. No, $1 million. If I buy this bank, it's going to be my subsidiary. But this bank is subject to only Turkish bank regulations, not US banking regulations. So if you want to do some, questionable stuff, for example, there is a JP Morgan Chase subsidiary bank. If you don't want to buy a controlling interest in a subsidiary, you can also have affiliate banks. These are, you partially own a large percentage, so you have some controlling interest, but not totally controlled. This is typically common if you want to have a large affiliate. For example, let's look at the ownership structure of Garanti Bank in Turkey. Let's say, okay, they went up to 86. It used to be lower. 86% of the stakes are owned by Banco Bilbao. Let's use a different bank. Let's see. They must have changed things since I left the Turkish banking industry. Let's see. Anyway, that wasn't a good example, but especially if you want to kind of get started with some of the larger banks, you may not want to invest a lot of money and buy a controlling interest. So you kind of start small. Later on, you may add to it. For example, when I left banking industry in early 2000s, about a quarter of the Garanti Bank was owned by an Italian bank. And now about 80+% is owned by a Spanish bank. So they kind of increase their stake. You can read that other stuff. You also have offshore banking centers. These are typically useful to handle some of the more esoteric products. For example, if the bank wants to issue asset-backed securities, you typically do it through offshore banking centers. Or you want to help your clients to remain outside of the US system, you do it through offshore banking systems. And US persons cannot actually have offshore bank accounts, but if they have corporate subsidiaries outside of US, they can have offshore banking accounts. It's basically a go around of the banking regulations. You may have heard some of the offshore banking centers, the Cayman Islands, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Bermuda. It varies. You can read about that. Kind of a summary of what these things can do. Domestic banks, physical location US, they're subject to Fed Reserve requirements, FDIC deposits insured,